Welcome to the Worldview Weekend Hour. I'm Brandon House. My guest today is going to be Pinto. He's been with us before, and he's back again for another series of programs on the Counter-Reformation of the Jesuit Order. We've both been doing a lot of research over the last few years, and we're now combining our research, particularly the last 12 months. We've done a lot of research, and now we're combining our research for a series of programs, the Counter-Reformation of the Jesuit Order. Before we get to that, let me remind you, if you appreciate this broadcast and you want lots more programming like this on demand, then we invite you to join the Situation Room at situationroom.net. It's now over $8,000 in resources. We used to say $6,000. Now it's over $8,000, and it'll be $10,000 before you know it, because we're constantly adding more material into the Situation Room. It's really our VIP club. It's videos on demand, over 140 DVDs at this time. If you're watching this well into the future, then it's probably well more than that. But 140 on demand that you can watch right now. It's over 1,400 MP3s of our daily radio show, the Worldview Weekend radio broadcast, and a lot of other programs and things we have in there as well. My books are ebook format as well. You can check it out at situationroom.net, situationroom.net. If you also appreciate this broadcast, we hope you will consider supporting us either with a one-time contribution or a monthly tax-deductible contribution by visiting the website worldviewweekendfoundation.com, worldviewweekendfoundation.com. Now, if you're watching this on our free website, worldviewtube.com, then you're only going to get about 20 minutes of clips here and there. We do make some clips of these interviews available just sporadically throughout the year. But if you want to watch the entire interview, because all these interviews generally are about 50 minutes to 1 hour in length. If you want to watch the entire interview, you either need to watch our national television program, which you can watch online on Monday nights. Usually it's Monday nights at worldviewweekendtv.com. Worldviewweekendtv.com. You can watch our national television program if it doesn't air in your market. You can watch it online at worldviewweekendtv.com. If you don't catch our TV program, therefore, then you need to join the Situation Room to be able to watch this interview in its entirety. Again, you can join the Situation Room for a very nominal fee of just $59.95 a year and have access to over $8,000 in resources. Again, you can join at situationroom.net. That's situationroom.net. Chris, welcome back to the Memphis, Tennessee area over from Nashville.
Well, it's exciting to be here again. I like this area.
Well, thank you. We had a great Branson Worldview Weekend a few weeks ago, didn't we?
Yeah, we had an awesome time.
That was your first time to be at our Branson
Yeah.
Worldview Weekend with all those other speakers. The response was really great, wasn't it?
Yeah, there were a lot of people there. Everybody was very excited, very zealous for learning and zealous for the truth. It was a great time.
And you also have a daily national radio program, noiseofthunder.com. His program you can hear at worldviewradio.com, worldviewradio.com, or noiseofthunder.com is his website. You'll find it there as well. We had a lot of folks at our Worldview Weekend in Minneapolis that heard you speak, our Worldview Weekend in Branson, some more that you'll be with us in the future that are following your ministry now because of your national radio show, noiseofthunder.com. You've been doing that show now, what, about a year now?
Just over a year. We started it in May of 2011, so we just had our 1-year anniversary a short time ago.
And I think I remember the stats after about the first 4 weeks, you were doing about 4,000 downloads a month, weren't you?
Yeah, I think that was it.
It's well higher than that now.
Yeah, it's higher than that now.
So you've acquired quite the following, and you can check out his radio show on our website, worldviewradio.com. All right, well, you've been doing a lot of research. I've been doing research. We talk about this sometimes on our radio show, and particularly when you come on my radio show. And then we've been sharing our research back and forth on the phone, emailing each other information that we both find. And we decided we'd do a series of TV programs where I present some of my information and you comment, and then in another program you'll present some of your information. So this is not your typical interview setting where I just shoot questions at Chris. This is going to be more where I present some of the things I've uncovered, and then he's going to comment. And then a couple programs from now, after we've moved through the stuff I've put together, he'll present what he's uncovered, and then I'll comment. So we're really kind of bringing our research together to share with you. Isn't that about the proper way to put it together for folks to understand? All right, well, let's start out with the idea of the Counter-Reformation and the Jesuit Order. Of course, we know the Jesuit Order officially came into being around 1540 with Ignatius Loyola. But it would be accurate to say that really the idea and the concepts were going on before Ignatius, but he really just kind of formed it and really gave it some organization, didn't he?
Yeah, it said that he had formed a company of priests who were his followers and his disciples and this kind of thing, because he had saw what the reformers were doing. And what had happened at that time, if you read the book on the Jesuits by J.A. Wiley, Wiley talks about how all of the countries of Europe, which had been Catholic, or Western Europe really, which had been Catholic and devoted to the Pope, that from the time of Luther onward, in less than half a century, all but 2 of the nations of Western Europe had turned and become Protestant Reformed countries. So what ended up happening was you only had Italy and Spain who remained under papal authority. And so all the other countries of Europe had become these Reformed Protestant countries, and the Pope realized he had to do something. So there was this Spanish soldier who had been wounded in battle. His name was Ignatius Loyola, and he was very offended by the Reformers because he was a very zealous Roman Catholic. And so in 1540 he goes to the Vatican, meets with Pope Paul III, and gets a commission to found a military order in the Catholic Church whose purpose was to overturn the Protestant Reformation.
And that's why we refer to it as a counter-reformation.
Right, and that's what they called it as well. I mean, that's the historic
And that's going on to
term.
this day. I mean, here we are filming in Memphis, Tennessee in late May of 2012, and this counter-reformation is still going on today. In fact, I was talking to a former Catholic priest, a mutual friend of yours and mine. He was a Catholic priest for 22 years, Richard Bennett. And I asked him on the air, doesn't the Council of the Inquisition still exist? The office of the Inquisition still exists. It's never been closed. He verified that, yes, that office of the Inquisition in the Vatican has never been closed.
Right, and many people don't realize that the former Grand Inquisitor, the person who was the head of the Inquisition during the reign of Pope John Paul II, was Cardinal Ratzinger, who then, after John Paul II died, Cardinal Ratzinger became Pope Benedict XVI.
I think it's important you back up and say what you just said again so people really understand what you just said.
The current Pope, Pope Benedict XVI, is the former head of Rome's Great Inquisition in modern times. He was the Grand Inquisitor. And this is well known and admitted in the Catholic Church. If you go, there are even some modern websites that kind of make fun of the idea, who are in favor of Pope Benedict. They say, oh yeah, he's our former Grand Inquisitor, this kind of thing. They tell jokes about it, but it's a very real office, and he held a very real position.
And again, most people don't realize, I mean, it's amazing the church history that people don't know. And I'm embarrassed of the church history I don't know after I learned something. How did I not know this, you know? But for instance, the Inquisition went on, really, as we call it today, for 605 years. But really, in many respects, it's never stopped. It's still going. But as we call it, the Inquisition of the Church of Rome went on for 605 years, I believe it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, I usually tell people that it went on for more than 600 years because, like you said, there's never really any point in history that you can say the Inquisition ended, because in the mid-19th century, when the Italian revolutionaries went in, they go into the papal prisons in the 1850s, and they discovered that they were still torturing people in the underground Inquisition there in Rome. And you've even got writers like Charles Spurgeon who were writing about this in his magazine, The Sword and the Trowel. Then you read the book by Edmund Paris.
Do you have that?
Yeah, got
Grab
a
it.
copy of it. The Secret History of the Jesuits. And Edmund Paris, who was a French journalist, basically revealed the connections between Nazi Germany and the Vatican and the Jesuit order.
And I have my copy here. As you can see, it's all flagged up with, I mean, and again, this book by Edmund Paris, while it's being published by someone different, it was actually written by Edmund Paris, so they shouldn't confuse maybe who's publishing it with the author, Edmund Paris, because this was published years after he wrote it.
Years after he wrote it. And he basically reveals that World War II and the Holocaust under Hitler was a modern-day Inquisition. That's what the Holocaust was. And this seems to be the conclusion as well of a former Roman Catholic priest named Dr. L.H. Lehman. And he wrote this book during World War II, and it's called Behind the Dictators. And the whole point of the book was to reveal that the Vatican and the papacy was really behind the dictators, in particular Hitler and Mussolini.
And there's a lot of documentation in this book, The Secret History of the Jesuits. It goes into how the Jesuits were definitely working, and the Church of Rome was definitely working with the Vatican. You know, Hitler was trying to build the Third Reich, and we go back and we talk about the First Reich coming into being around 800, and with Charlemagne, and that kind of became the model, correct? Or was it 600? Charlemagne.
Yeah, Charlemagne is considered the first Holy Roman Emperor. He was crowned by the Pope And so he becomes essentially the emperor over all of
Was it
Europe.
600 or 800? You remember the date?
It was in the 8th century.
8th century, okay.
So,
And so he gets the title Holy Roman Emperor there in Germany. He gets that from the Pope, from the Vatican.
Right.
And that's your First Reich.
that's the First Reich.
And then you move on to your Second Reich, which again is the same thing, different time period, same idea, same concept. The leader there in Germany getting his title from the Pope. Then Hitler tried to bring in his Third Reich. And by the way, the term Reich means empire or kingdom. The word Reich means empire or kingdom. So there was a First Reich, a Second Reich, Hitler's Third Reich. We can clearly prove the connection of the First and Second Reich to the Vatican. And the Third Reich, we can also prove the connection of Hitler's Reich to the Vatican, not only in the secret order history of the Jesuits, but what do you have there?
I've got this book. Now, this I think is a very important book. This is written by Adrian Hilton, who is part of the conservative British political party over in England, and it's called The Principality and Power of Europe. And what he writes about the whole history of the relationship between Germany and the Vatican, and how the Holy Roman Emperor was always the king of Germany. And that's why right now when they're talking about the European Union, and they're saying that Germany essentially rules the European Union, that's very significant historically, because the European Union is essentially a modernized version of trying to recreate the Holy Roman Empire.
And there is going to be a revived Holy Roman Empire, because Daniel chapter 2 speaks of this. Daniel chapter 2 speaks of this. Daniel chapter 7 speaks of this. Revelation 13, Revelation 17, all speak of this revived Roman Empire that actually becomes the revived Holy Roman Empire. And in fact, this was recently even in the news. This is coming from the express.co.uk. This is an article dated in May of 2012. EU plot to scrap Britain. This is May 4th, 2012. Here's what it says. It says that the desire to merge the jobs of President of the European Council and President of the European Commission. That's their goal, to create a super European Union president. But there are people who are not so happy about this. The article goes on to say the new bureaucrat would not be directly elected by voters. It's set to get sweeping control over the entire EU and force member countries into ever greater political and economic union. That economic union is so crucial because right now, as we're filming in May of 2012, they got a real mess over there in Europe. But CNBC had an article yesterday by an author talking about the fact that this whole mess over there may be actually manipulated on purpose to create this United States of Europe. I thought, CNBC has an article by a guy named Patrick, I think his name was Patrick Allen, saying, hey, you ever think that this whole crisis over there, this whole financial crisis, why do these guys act so calm and so laid back about what's happening as these world leaders get together and they just act so confident and laid back about it? He goes on to say perhaps this entire financial crisis has been used deliberately in order to create what was the goal all along, was a United States of Europe, or a revived Europe. And so here you have this article dated May 4th, 2012, saying, hey, if you get a super European Union president, combining the jobs of the president of the European Council and the president of the European Commission, and create this super EU president, he can force onto these countries greater economic union, because right now there are a lot of nations, particularly London, not using the euro. So if they can force them all into one currency, they're definitely giving up their sovereignty and coming together. I thought it's interesting that even CNBC has an article by a columnist saying maybe this chaos has always been the desire to get people to go where they wanted them to go with the European Union.
Yeah, people over there, I mean, I've talked to people who are from England and from, that whole part of the world, and they say that the design of the European Union from the beginning has been to ultimately force all of these nations together on behalf of Rome. And what they did is, apparently during World War II, they used fascism. They used Mussolini in Italy, and then they used Hitler in Germany to try and force fascism upon the whole of Europe and unite Europe by force. Then that didn't work. It fell apart. Hitler loses the war. And then afterwards, they said, all right, we got to do something. So they changed their tactic, and they developed this idea of economic interdependence through the EU. And the idea was, well, if we're economically interdependent on each other, then we won't go to war again. And now it's all falling to pieces, and they've got chaos, and they've got people over in Greece who are committing suicide, literally. I mean, older people who cannot survive economically, and they're killing themselves. They've got parents that are taking their kids and dropping them off at the local Greek Orthodox church with a sign around their neck saying, "I can't take care of my kids, please take care of them for me." I mean, this is the kind of chaos that's happening right now in that part of the world.
It's sad. Hello, I'm Brandon House, and thank you for watching the Worldview Weekend Hour. One reason we started WVWTV.com was because we have found a disturbing trend, and that is many within Christian media are censoring those of us who are politically incorrect. In other words, it has become politically incorrect within much of evangelicalism today to point out such biblical facts as Mormons are not Christians. The Jesus of the Church of Rome is not the Jesus of the Bible. If you're offering up Jesus in a wafer or in the juice through transubstantiation, as the Church of Rome does, the Catholic Church, that's not the Jesus of the Bible. We know that the Jesus of Mormonism is not the Jesus of the Bible. The Jesus of the Word of Faith is not the Jesus of the Bible. They actually teach that Jesus came to earth as a man, not as God, and then became divine. That is not what the Bible teaches. That is not the Jesus of the Bible. If you redefine Jesus, you redefine the gospel. And we have increasingly been told by broadcast outlets, Christian magazines, they won't take our program or they won't take our advertising because of the things we have declared. In fact, not too long ago, I heard in a sermon, Dr. John MacArthur said they have to be very careful what they put into his program, Grace to You, or Christian radio networks will pull his program. Do you know that Walter Martin, back in the early 80s, spoke at the ordination service for a friend of mine? And in that ordination service, which I have a copy of the audio, Dr. Walter Martin said, back in, I think it was 1982, 83, he said that Christian media would increasingly become known for censoring Christians. He said he can go onto secular outlets and speak biblical truth quicker than he can onto Christian media outlets. Do you know we find that to be true? I get interviewed on secular talk stations about biblical things that most Christian radio stations would never interview me about or allow me to talk about. So we have found it necessary to start WVWTV.com, where we can broadcast our weekly television show through our computer system, through Roku, iPhone, iPad, Android. It's making it available to anyone, all throughout the world. We also have a radio page. It's worldviewradio.com, where we carry a lot of Bible teaching at worldviewradio.com. In other words, we're finding it increasingly necessary to be our own broadcast outlet because much of evangelical broadcasting, I believe, is not interested in biblical truth. They're interested in political correctness. If you appreciate the fact that we bring you programming through our worldviewradio.com and through WVWTV.com like we do, we need you to partner with us through the Worldview Weekend Foundation. If you'd like to make a tax-deductible contribution, you can do that right now at worldviewweekendfoundation.com. That's worldviewweekendfoundation.com. Or you can just simply click the donate button on the page right now. Thank you for helping us get out the truth, even if much of, quote, Christian media outlets today don't want it told. Thank you for helping us get out the truth. The article in the express.co.uk continues on saying, opponents fear the plan could create a modern-day equivalent of the European emperor envisioned by Napoleon Bonaparte or a return to the Holy Roman Empire of Charlemagne that dominated Europe in the Dark Ages. Chris, that's very interesting because here is a secular publication saying, hey, this idea that we're seeing being bantered around here in May of 2012, the secular press is reporting that opponents of this are saying, hey, this could create a revived Holy Roman Empire. Not just a revived Roman Empire, which the Bible says will happen, Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Revelation 13, Revelation 17. There will be a revived Roman Empire. But they go so far in this secular press, the opponents in Europe are saying this might actually create a revived Holy Roman Empire. The holy part would be the dominance of the Church of Rome over this union. And we see multiple articles, if you go back in time. Here's one from October of 2003, October 31st, 2003. This is a headline, Religion is Key to Protecting Human Life and Protecting Peace, Pope says to European leaders. Again, October 31st, 2003. you have the Pope John Paul II, saying, hey, if you're going to do this, you're going to be successful, religion has got to be a big part of what you're doing. Then you fast forward to another article I found. This is October of 2009, and this is Pope says Europe needs Christian values to prosper. Values Christianity fostered on the continent are what inspired the movement toward European unity and are the only guarantee of its success, the Pope said October 19th, 2009. So you have the last Pope, the current Pope, as we sit here in 2012, saying, hey, if the European Union is to succeed, it's got to be about religion. We have Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, saying what? We've got to have religion. Religion is going to be the key to globalization. He has the Tony Blair Faith Foundation to bring the religions of the world together. Right. So here you have a secular publication saying, opponents fear this will create a return to not just a Roman Empire, but a Holy Roman Empire, the connection back to the Vatican.
And I believe that this is something, I mean, from my research, this is something that the Vatican and the Jesuit order in particular have been working on for at least 200 years, because they talked about this back in 1825, in the early part of the 19th century. They talked about creating a gigantic temple into which they would force all mankind to enter, and that the way they would do it is to make themselves all things to all men. In other words, find a way to accommodate everybody's belief system.
Ecumenicalism.
Ecumenicalism. And then you find this movement through the 19th century leading up to the World Parliament of Religions in 1893, and that's when they began to pull all of these different religious groups together that beforehand had been dramatically separated by theological differences. And then of course this leads to Vatican Council II and the ecumenical movement that we've been overwhelmed by here in modern times.
Absolutely. This article in the express.co.uk continues saying, Paul Nuttall of the UK Independence Party said, quote, "This is a truly ridiculous idea that must never be allowed to happen. It sounds as if they are trying to go back to the days of the Holy Roman Empire." So again, we have the idea of this Holy Roman Empire being mentioned several times. And we did have a First Reich, we had a Second Reich, we had a Third Reich Hitler. Even, I think it's History Channel and Military Channel, I know History Channel, I've seen documentaries talking about the fact that the Vatican was involved in taking SS criminals out of Germany through what was called the Rat Line and moving them down to South America. So the evidence for the Vatican being involved in a Holy Roman Empire, the First Reich, the Second Reich, the Third Reich, is overwhelming. I now believe we're seeing the creation of a Fourth Reich, again, Reich meaning empire or kingdom. I believe we're seeing the beginning of that Reich being built again, that empire, that kingdom. It'll be a Holy Roman Empire, not just a revived Roman Empire, but a Holy Roman Empire connected right back to the Vatican. And again, this is consistent with Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Revelation 13, Revelation 17. Here's a picture of Tony Blair signing the European Union Constitution on Capitol Hill line in Rome, October 29th, 2004. Chris, notice the humongous statue behind him, Pope Innocent X, as they sit there and sign the Constitution to create the European Union. Again, overwhelming evidence the Vatican has been heavily involved in pushing this idea for a long time.
Yeah, and Tony Blair, it's generally believed, but well, by people who research these things, that he was sort of a secret agent for the Vatican while he was Prime Minister of England, because the day after he left that office, he converted and became a Roman Catholic. His wife is a devout Catholic and so on, and so it was known that he had very strong Catholic leanings, and that all seemed, and he met with the Pope repeatedly, and it all seems to fit in with his view of Rome. And now, once he left office, like you said before, he starts this Tony Blair Faith Foundation, and he's really pushing interfaith and trying to find ways to unite all the different religions of the world into a global religious system.
All right, here's another article. This one is dated 2011, May 9th, 2011, so a little more than a year ago. Jesuit to become chaplain of the U.S. House of Representatives. That's a first, isn't it?
Yeah, first in history. John Boehner, who's a devout Roman Catholic, chose the Jesuit priest Patrick J. Conroy, I think is his name, and he consulted with Nancy Pelosi. This is what's very interesting, because Nancy Pelosi is also a very devout Roman Catholic. In fact, if you go online, you'll find a picture, a photo of Pelosi bowing and kissing the Pope's ring when he came to America. So she's a very devout Catholic on the left. Then John Boehner is a devout Catholic on the right. The two of them met together, they discussed this issue, and they appoint the first Jesuit in history.
So let's review. What we've learned is the Jesuit order was officially founded in 1540 by Ignatius Loyola. The whole idea is a counter-reformation. We believe we can't be dogmatic on some of these things, but some of them we can be. But we believe that Scripture tells us definitely there will be a revived Holy Roman Empire. Revelation 13, Revelation 17, Daniel 2, Daniel 7, as we've talked about. We see the evidence now even of secular press talking about, hey, this whole idea of what's going on in Europe could create a revived Holy Roman Empire. We're showing how we believe the Vatican has been behind this idea for some time. In another program, I'll go into great detail in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and the European Union Commission, which has already divided the world into 10 regions, 10 trading blocks, like your European Union, your North American Union, your South American Union. It seems to be, again, we can't be dogmatic about this, but it seems to be setting up the idea or the concept that the 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour give their authority and power to the beast. We don't know that that will be 10 regions of the world divided. We can't be dogmatic about it, but it does seem that that's where we're going. And indeed, the Vatican is now continuing to push these concepts and these ideas, as we'll continue seeing in this program. Here is Time Magazine. This is April 23rd, 1973. Here's the cover of Time Magazine. By the way, who is this Jesuit general? There's the Jesuit general, for those who don't know, which is often referred to as the Black Pope, because he wears a black robe. And many think he's really the power behind the throne, if you will.
Right.
Who is this on the cover of Time Magazine?
That is Pedro Arrupe. Pedro Arrupe, who's one of the more nefarious Jesuit generals in history. Yeah, Pedro Arrupe, who admitted that Fidel Castro, of course, was trained by the Jesuits, and when he was confronted about that, he said, "And what makes you think that we are not proud of Fidel Castro?" And of course, so he's admitting that they're very supportive of Castro, and of course that would lead into the whole Jesuit history behind communism.
Which we're going to get into in detail in another program.
Okay, in another program. But yeah, that would be the reason why I think Pedro Arrupe would be proud of Castro, because the Jesuits designed communism.
And they use communism, as we'll see in another program, for their own advantage. So lest people think this is conspiracy theory, here we have Time Magazine, again, show the cover if you would, April 23rd, 1973, doing a huge piece on the Jesuit order. But we not only have that, here we have a New York Times best-selling book, The Jesuits, by Martin Malachi. I believe this book was published in 1987, if I remember correctly. Let me look here.
Malachi Martin.
Malachi Martin, sorry. Yeah, 1987, published in 87. It ended up being a New York Times bestseller.
Yep.
Was he a Jesuit?
He was a Jesuit. He left the Jesuit order and then started writing books about what was going on in the Vatican. And in this book, he gives the assertion that the Jesuits have, because it's called the Society of Jesus and the Betrayal of the Roman Catholic Church. So he's putting forth the assertion that the Jesuits have betrayed the Catholic Church somehow.
And I don't, what do you make of that?
Well, it's it's hard to say. I mean, he became a very famous, very prominent Catholic, ex-Jesuit who wrote these books supposedly as exposures about the controversy happening in the Catholic Church. But at the same time, if you know history and you know the history of the Jesuits, he's carefully covering up bits and pieces of information. And so, I don't know, I've always been somewhat suspicious of his writings, that there's a certain, kind of a Hegelian dialectic going on with him where the Jesuits had him leave the order and then write these books for a reason, with a purpose in mind.
It's kind of covering their tracks a little bit.
Right.
But I think you believe, that there isn't this war going on between the Jesuits and the Vatican as he portrays. I believe they're working hand in glove. Do you?
I do. Now there is. I think the Jesuits are working in conjunction with the Holy See, meaning the government of Rome. But I think you have a lot of Catholics, a lot of sincere Catholics, who do not like what the Jesuits have done to the Catholic Church, how they brought in ecumenism, how they're supporting immoral practices and things like this, which many of your sincere traditional Catholics don't approve of.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to tell you about my new book, Religious Trojan Horse, subtitled How False Teaching from Neo-Evangelicals, the New Religious Right, and the Spiritual Left have invaded the church to establish a coming religious world government. This is about 3 years of writing, a few more years than that in the research. It's 488 pages, almost 600 footnotes. You can read about it as far as the description, the table of contents, even a sample chapter on our website there at worldviewweekend.com, so I won't take the time to tell you about that. It is, again, hardcover, and I hope you pick up a copy, maybe a couple copies. I'd be glad to sign a copy for you or for your pastor, associate pastor, friends. It makes a great gift. But in addition to the hardcover book, we have something we've done this time that's brand new. We've done an ebook. Well, that's not new. We've done ebooks before. But what's new is this is actually called an ebook documentary. That's what we're calling it, an ebook documentary. You may ask, why are we calling it an ebook documentary? Because what we've done is we've taken about 100 links to videos and we've embedded them in the ebook. So here's the ebook. You just bring it up on your computer. You can read this on your iPad, your computer. They tell me you can read it on your iPhone and your Android and those kind of devices. But here it is. To read the ebook, you don't have to be connected to the internet, but if you want the videos to play, you're going to have to be connected to the internet. Throughout the book, we've embedded almost 100 links to videos. But here is where I talk about Lou Engle. Here's a video. You click that link. What pops up is a video.
We have words of knowledge. It's not little playthings we're doing. We're bringing forth the very mind of God into someone's life.
And what he goes on to say is that dreams are seed thoughts from God. In other words, dreams are equal to the Word of God. One of the things I talk about in the book are the manifestations that we're seeing within Kundalini Yoga over in the Far East, in India, Hinduism, and the same manifestations that we're seeing in the Word of Faith movement, the New Apostolic Reformation. Now, I can tell you about it in the book, but in the ebook, I can actually show you some demonstrations. Let me show you one of the video clips where a link is embedded in this ebook of manifestations that are showing up in Kundalini Yoga in India with Hinduism, and then how it's manifesting itself now in, quote, the church, in quote, today, what I believe is the false church. First, Kundalini Yoga. Notice these same manifestations, by the way, are showing up now in the Word of Faith teaching. We're seeing these, I believe these are the same manifestations. Watch this.
And it was the very pinnacle prayer of Moses' life. And this prayer came after a burning bush, came after the release of national judgments, came after...
Again, I believe these are not biblical manifestations at all. I believe they're very similar to the manifestations we're seeing in Hinduism and Kundalini Yoga. Again, I tell you about this in the book, but it sure helps to be able to see these manifestations. These are just a few of the things we show in the book. In addition to having links to these video clips embedded in the ebook, every one of the footnotes we have, almost 600, are active. So footnote number 314, you click on it, it brings you right to the bottom of the page where you can see a hyperlink to the article I'm quoting, the Orange County Register. So you can actually see the source I'm quoting. Then you click the link again, brings you right back to where you're reading. So we click 314, takes us right to the bottom of the page, click on that, brings up the Orange County Register, and you can see the actual article where we're talking about Rick Warren having Dr. Oz in his church. Close out the article, you can go right back to where you're reading. Just click 314 again, look at this. Boom, takes you right back into the text where you're reading. Thank you for this opportunity to tell you about the new book, Religious Trojan Horse. Would you do me a favor and post this video on your Facebook page, send out to your email address book a link to this video and to a link where they can read the description of the book. Help us get out the word about this book. This is not just a book. This is actually a book that deals with theology. This book is loaded with scripture, and we address a lot of theological issues. This book actually will be relevant 10 years from now, 20 years from now, because we're dealing with so many important theological issues facing the church today. So thank you for helping me get out the word about the new book, Religious Trojan Horse. Hope you'll get it as a hardcover or as an ebook at worldviewweekend.com. Thank you.
And so the Jesuits have been at odds with different Catholic leaders and groups and things like that. You know, if you study when Pacelli, Pope Pius XII, tried to work out the agreement with Hitler, the Concordat with Hitler, he went to one German leader after another. Many of them were Catholics, and they said no, because you have Catholics out there who really don't like the idea of the Holy See and the papacy invading the rights of sovereign countries and things like that. And so they'll oppose them. And so for this reason, they often find themselves at odds with the Jesuits.
But again, the Jesuit and we think the Holy See or the Vatican are working hand in glove, while some Catholics and Catholic groups are opposing what they're doing.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so all that to say, you have a best-selling book by Malachi Martin that is The Jesuits. He was a Jesuit. Mm-hmm. You have Time Magazine, April 23rd, 1973. I mean, this is not conspiracy. This is well-documented. Mm-hmm. Scores of books have been written about this. Here's what Time Magazine had to say. April 23rd, 1973. Apart from their shared religious identity and their common appendage, SJ, for Society of Jesus, they are a bewilderingly diverse fraternity. They are seismologists, swamis. Oh, wait a minute. Let's hold right there. You have Catholic swamis, because that fits right in with their ecumenicalism. And this is where we've showed pictures, and we can throw some up on the screen now, of this Pope, the current Pope. Here we are filming in May of 2012, the last Pope, Pope John Paul II, getting blessings from Hindu swamis, getting blessings from Native Americans or witch doctors. We have the Pope kissing the Quran, the last Pope, this Pope. I mean, you have the Pope standing with all these different world religious leaders. This is why the Time Magazine, April 23rd, 73, can say, hey, even some Jesuits are swamis, because they're trying to infiltrate all religions and then turn them back to Rome.
Exactly. I mean, Pope John Paul II, took the mark of Shiva on his forehead. He even in Assisi, Italy, let the Dalai Lama go into a Catholic church and take down the cross from the altar and put up a statue of the Buddha, and had the monks go in and worship there in a Catholic church, worship Buddha in a Catholic church. Many Catholics are, they're shocked and offended by that when they learn about it. Some of them don't even believe it happened, but it really did. It's all documented.
Well, there's actually a group of Catholics that have put out a coffee table book with a lot of these pictures that we've shown on the program before, showing these pictures of these rituals that we've been talking about with this ecumenicalism, and they're appalled. So there are Catholics and Catholic groups that are saying, we don't like the fact the Pope's doing this,
right,
and are denouncing him. So you wonder, why would Time Magazine in 73 say, hey, some of these Jesuits are swamis? The article went on to say they're swamis, they're architects, they're engineers, theologians, and winemakers, politicians, lawyers, social workers, astronomers, evolutionaries, economists, as well as missionaries, teachers, and parish priests. The article went on to say the new Jesuit must still spend perhaps 10 years in preparation, but he may live in a fraternity-style surroundings in Berkeley and Cambridge, Massachusetts, or in Manhattan. Quoting out of the Time Magazine piece where it goes on to quote this little poem, Time Magazine says, there are Jesuits young and old all across the spectrum of opinion, observed Catholic journalist John Cogley. And an accurate bit of doggerel in the Jesuit Weekly America, he writes this little poem, quote, there are Jesuits left and Jesuits right, a pro and con for most any fight. So wherever you stand not alone. Every little movement has a Jebby of its own, end quote. Now, this is absolutely crucial, because what Time Magazine is noting back in 73, quoting this little poem by this Catholic journalist, a Jebby on every issue. That is the Hegelian dialectic process. You made reference to that a while ago. We have talked about the Hegelian dialectic process over and over for years. And the reason we keep talking about it, Chris, is because if people don't understand the Hegelian dialectic process, they don't understand what is one of the major manipulative tools for manipulation that is used today, not only by the Church of Rome, but by all kinds of people, all kinds of movements. The communist, Saul Alinsky types, Barack Obama types, the Clintons, the Bushes. I mean, people from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party to the Communists to the Vatican. This Hegelian dialectic process is used over and over again. And I believe that the Hegelian dialectic process, which we'll see in a minute, is a major tool of the Vatican, pitting opposites against each other, which is why you'll have a Jesuit who's a Swami, a Jesuit who is a communist, a Jesuit who is pro-capitalist. You have people on all sides of every issues in the Jesuit order. A Jebby on the left, a Jebby on the right. No matter where you stand, there's a Jebby in the fight. They need that conflicting to cause things to synthesize or to merge together, which comes from the George Hegel of Germany, which gives us the Hegelian dialectic process. But here's Time Magazine even noting a Jebby is going to be on every side of every issue. Would you agree with this?
Oh, absolutely. It's why, I mentioned earlier, John Boehner and Nancy Pelosi. They're at opposite ends. One's a right-winger, another one's a left-winger. People typically in the Christian community and evangelicals, we think of Catholics as being strong conservatives. but you have a lot of liberal Catholics like the Kennedy family, Nancy Pelosi, as we said earlier, and many others. I mean, Barack Obama, in fact, one of his inspiration for his grassroots campaign to become president was an ex-Jesuit named Gregory Galuzzo, who's supporting here Obama, a strong left-winger, and then after he's elected, he gets this honorary degree from Notre Dame University, a Catholic, typically Catholic university. Why would they give Obama an honorary degree? Because there's a whole left wing as part of this Hegelian back and forth system. There's a whole left wing in the Catholic Church that most people don't know about.
Here's the Chicago Mag. We'll get into this later in another program, but here's Chicago Mag. You can find it right online. This is an article that I just stumbled across in my research a few months ago, and I was shocked. And it, again, is an article about how this former Jesuit, Gregory Galuzzo, was a former Jesuit. And the article goes on to say that who does Barack Obama give credit for his becoming president and organizing his grassroots movement, but none other than a Jesuit. So you have Jesuits on the Republican side, you have Jesuits on the Democrat side, you have Jesuits on the socialist side, you have Jesuits on the free market side. They're all over the place. And that's a major tool. In fact, in his book, The Jesuits, former Jesuit Malachi Martin wrote in his book in '87 that, and he's quoting a well-known Jesuit of the 70s, Francis Carney. He says, Francis Carney, a prominent Jesuit of the 1970s, regarded dialectical conflict as that which should be, quote, treasured as a key to the future of Catholicism. This, again, is Malachi Martin quoting this Jesuit Francis Carney saying dialectical conflict is important, and he goes on to say it should be treasured as the key to the future of Catholicism. So what is the key to the future? The dialectic, pitting opposites against each other. And that's what we have going on economically, politically, religiously. This is the main tool. I mean, we're going to look at 8 areas that Jesuits have targeted, 8 areas. But in these 8 areas, their main tool is the Hegelian dialectic process. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, and you know there's a great quote that people could look up, or maybe you'll want to put it in this presentation from John Adams, shortly after the American Revolution, where he's talking about the Jesuits, and he says famously, "I know of no body of men more deserving of eternal damnation on earth or in hell than the sons of Loyola," meaning the Jesuit order. And he says, because of our laws of religious liberty, will we not have regular swarms of them here in as many disguises as only a king of the gypsies can assume? And then he goes on to say they're going to be poets, they're going to be artists, they're going to be lawyers, they're going to be merchants, and on and on and on. So there are many disguises, and the fact that they infiltrate all these different communities was well known even during the time of the American Revolution.
And in fact, they were banned from some of the colonies in the American Revolution.
Yeah, they
actually before the Revolution they were banned.
Before the Revolution, yeah.
They were banned in the colonies.
In Boston, in the Massachusetts Bay, had a ban on Jesuits and Catholic priests and Romanists.
They couldn't live there.
Couldn't live there
because the folks who were putting together the colonies knew that they couldn't be trusted, and that their goal would be to infiltrate and to turn it back to the Vatican.
Absolutely.
And they didn't want their colonies or their governments they were forming to be controlled by the Vatican.
I often point people to a document, a well-known document done by Samuel Adams called The Rights of the Colonists in 1772. And if you read that document, Sam Adams is describing the Christian idea of religious tolerance. And he says the belief is that tolerance should be extended to all whose religion is not subversive or hostile to the powers of the state. And he says papists and Roman Catholics are excluded. And he goes on to explain how they create imperium imperio, I think he says. That is an order within an order, a secret order inside the countries that they operate, and then they plan and they plot to overthrow the established power and bring them under the authority of the Pope.
And that's why we'll see in another program that the Vatican will even use communism to create that chaos, to overthrow those governments, and then to establish a new government that is loyal and subservient to them.
Right. And like you said earlier, Brennan, this is not, I think it's important to stress to people, this is not conspiracy theory. You've got Samuel Adams.
Yes.
You've got John Adams and so on. We've got prominent figures of history. There's a whole host of others. We could quote Napoleon Bonaparte and so on that talked about the Jesuits and their methods.
Charles Spurgeon.
Charles Spurgeon, who wrote about them in The Sword and the Trowel many times.
Hello, I'm Brandon House, and thank you for watching the Worldview Weekend Hour. In about 1982-83, my friend, the late Dr. Ron Carlson, had his ordination service. And the man that delivered the ordination message that day was a man by the name of Walter Martin. I have an audio of the sermon he preached that day, back in about 1982-83. You know what's striking? In that presentation, he said that Christian media would increasingly become known for censoring biblical truth. In fact, he talked about the fact that he could go on a lot of secular radio and television outlets and say things that Christian media outlets would not let him say. Well, that was 1982-83. And guess what? We can tell you from firsthand experience of Christian media outlets that don't like what we have to say. And it's simply biblical truth. Recently, a well-known magazine that claims to be a biblical worldview magazine would not take our advertising. They didn't like the fact that we were calling out the false Jesus and false gospel of Mormonism, of the Word of Faith, of the Church of Rome, of the New Apostolic Reformation. And we find that many radio stations don't want to carry our radio show because we speak biblical truth. I believe that much of Christian media today is doing exactly what Dr. Walter Martin said was occurring and would only increase. They're censoring biblical truth because, you see, I believe there's a form of political correctness that's followed even within Christian media. It's not politically correct to speak out against Mormonism. It's not politically correct to speak out and say, hey, the Jesus of the Church of Rome is not the Jesus of the Bible. When they're offering Jesus to be sacrificed in the wafer or in the juice through transubstantiation every week, as the Church of Rome does, the Catholic Church, that's not the Jesus of the Bible. You redefine Jesus, you redefine the gospel. But it's not politically correct today to say these things. In fact, I was listening to a sermon not too long ago by Dr. John MacArthur. And in that sermon, he said that they have to be very careful what they put into their daily Bible teaching program, Grace to You, because if they put certain things in, stations won't carry the program or will drop the program altogether. Well, that's why we have found the need to increasingly create our own broadcast outlet, where we can speak biblical truth without what I believe is now becoming censorship within the Christian media. If you appreciate Worldview Weekend Radio and Worldview TV, I would invite you to partner with us through the Worldview Weekend Foundation. If you'd like to make a tax-deductible contribution, you can do so now by visiting the website worldviewweekendfoundation.com. You can become a monthly contributor automatically, or you can make a one-time contribution or contributions as you see fit at worldviewweekendfoundation.com. Again, we've started Worldview Weekend Television, wvwtv.com, so that we can get out biblical truth without fear of censorship or without fear of, well, if we say this, this outlet won't carry it or this outlet will cancel the program. So now we're pretty independent to speak biblical truth without apology and without compromise. If you appreciate that fact, then would you please partner with us right now? By the way, it costs quite a bit of money to put the program together, as well as the fact that when people watch the show, they're using bandwidth. All of this bandwidth costs money, and we need help in underwriting not only the production of the broadcast, but also the bandwidth. Thank you so much for partnering with us through the Worldview Weekend Foundation. And again, you got Time Magazine doing a big piece on them. It's documenting some of the things we've been saying.
When the Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street movement came out, and there was all the chaos with Occupy Wall Street, you had the Jesuit priest, Tom Rees, who came out and he was talking about the Occupy Wall Street protesters, and he said that Pope Benedict was sympathetic with them.
Oh yes, that made many secular news reports that the Occupy Wall Street crowd had gained the support of the Pope.
Right, and he was referencing the Pope as being a Marxist, essentially saying that yes, he agrees with redistribution of wealth and a lot of these socialist Marxist principles.
Well, I saw another article a few years ago, the Vatican buries the hatchet with Marx. That was another headline I have in our file. Because again, this helps them to create the chaos and the dissension to overthrow those governments that are not subservient to them, and then they come in with a new government and they establish their authority. Just as you would have the Holy Roman Emperor one and with the First Reich and the Second Reich, those were kings who had their kingdom, but they were loyal and they were submissive to the Vatican, correct?
Correct, absolutely. That was the way that the government of the Middle Ages operated. The Pope would crown the Holy Roman Emperor, and that symbolized, because they believe the Pope is in the place of God. That, because he's the vicar of Christ, they say, and Christ is the King of Kings, they argue that the Pope then is the chief king over all the kings of the world, and that all the kings owe him loyalty. And so when he gives them a crown, like the, Charlemagne and onward, that's a symbol that Charlemagne is to rule under the authority of the Pope. And so if he disobeys the Pope, then the Pope can take his crown away and kick him off the throne and put somebody else there. And this principle was what so many of the wars of old Europe were fought over. It was over papal authority. And so it's why it's so significant, bringing this up into modern times, when you have the Vatican supporting Hitler during World War II. It's the Roman Catholic Center Party in Germany that gave Hitler his totalitarian power. They're the ones that voted to give him absolute authority. You can find that in the book Hitler's Pope by John Cornwell. And John Cornwell is a Cambridge scholar, and he had access to the Vatican's archives to document all of this. So, and it's very symbolic because it was based upon an agreement that Hitler made with the Vatican, and they say, okay, we're basically going to give you the crown of the Holy Roman Emperor and give you absolute authority in Germany. That's what they did. And there was even a Time magazine article at the time, back in the 1930s, that knew history and said that Hitler was essentially being created or given the authority of the Holy Roman Emperor.
Time magazine, 1930s. Again, this is not conspiracy. Yep. This is mainstream publications have reported years ago what we're reporting here today.
Exactly.
This is just forgotten history.
Yeah.
But the reason we bring it up is because we're seeing this being recreated as there's this push by the Vatican for a global power. As we'll see in another program, you have the Pope calling for a world political authority with teeth, that it's got to have religion. Mm-hmm. And so you see the Vatican working behind the scenes in Europe and around the world to create a global dominant world religious government. What, again, some were saying in the UK will be a revived Holy Roman Empire, and yet the Bible speaks of a revived Holy Roman Empire. And then these world leaders will turn and give their power to the Antichrist. So really, this is all historical and very important. We talk about Time magazine. We talk about Malachi Martin and his best-selling book. We talk about Spurgeon, all these different sources. Well, here's another source, again, to show you this is not conspiracy. Here is Fox's Book of Martyrs. I mean, this is a well-known book. Fox's Book of Martyrs describes the Jesuits this way. The Emperor Ferdinand, whose hatred of the Bohemian Protestants was without bounds, not thinking he had sufficiently oppressed them, instituted a high court to prosecute the reformers upon the plan of the Inquisition, with this difference that the court was to travel from place to place and always to be attended by a body of troops. This court was conducted chiefly by Jesuits, and from their decision there was no appeal, by which it may be easily conjectured that it was a dreadful tribunal indeed. Fox's Book of Martyrs goes on to say, this bloody court, attended by a body of troops, made the tour of Bohemia. They seldom examined or saw a prisoner, for the soldiers were permitted to murder the Protestants as they pleased, and then to make a report of the matter to them afterward. So here we have Fox's Book of Martyrs, documenting the Jesuit order and what it was doing. And of course, we have about a over 600-year period there where you had 50 million Christians that were martyred during this Inquisition. There was a report I discovered and sent on to you, and you put on your website, I have it on my website, of a professor in South Carolina, did a rather thick report doing a historical documentation of the number 50 million. That number of 50 million Christians slaughtered is very credible. In fact, I had one friend of mine, a very distinguished gentleman in his 70s who's written many books and is very, very knowledgeable. He said, can you document this number of 50 million? I said, yes, I can. And I sent him a URL to the PDF of this professor's report out of South Carolina. And when he got done reading it, he said, how could anyone question that? I mean, he wasn't sure the number 50 million was accurate, but he got done reading the report and all the historical footnotes. There's no doubt 50 million were killed, Protestants killed during the Jesuit Inquisition.
Yeah, I mean, that number is consistent with what other historians of the past have said. I know John Dowling's book, The History of Romanism from the 19th century, he documents similar numbers. But it's considered a total of 68 million who were killed by the Inquisition, it's believed, for over 600 years, and 50 million of those were Bible-believing Christians who were literally persecuted simply because they believed the Bible is the Word of God, and they rejected the authority of the Pope and would not submit to Rome. That's why they were killed.
Amazing. Let's get into the ceremony of induction, an extreme oath. This is something, again, that is a matter of historical record. The Jesuits try to refute this, but it's not refutable. I mean, it's out there. It's documented, is it not?
Oh, yeah. It's been documented for hundreds of years.
And so if you go online and start researching, the listeners and the viewers should not be shocked if they see pro-Vatican websites saying this is false. But it has been done. Of course they're going to say it's false. When you read what it says, of course they're going to deny it.
Right.
But it has been verified.
The argument that they make, Brandon, is they say that in the 19th century, this was exposed, supposedly, in a book that was published. But then you research that book, and it turns out it was written by a Catholic priest who was working with the Counter-Reformation in England at that time. And they were questioning everything historically that had been well known by the English and by Protestants and people who were exposing the Jesuits in particular. So that's the only, like if you do research and they say, oh, this was exposed, go and look at the exposure, you'll see it was a Catholic priest who did it. And again, so I think it's not trustworthy. I mean, the thing goes back to the 1600s.
What is not trustworthy?
The Catholic priest's refutation,
okay,
I think is not trustworthy. I think the Jesuit oath is trustworthy. It goes back to the 1600s. It's been well documented. It was supported by Archbishop Usher, who was a very prominent Protestant churchman, and it's been cited by Dr. Ian Paisley in Northern Ireland in modern times.
Who is probably one of the world, maybe the world premier expert on the Jesuit order.
On the Jesuits and the Vatican and the Church of Rome. He's been fighting against Rome's influence in Northern Ireland for decades.
So if they could prove it to be false, to use it to discredit him, they would have done it already.
Right.
Yeah. All right, well, here's the Jesuit oath as we conclude the program. I therefore, this is what the Jesuits swear to, I therefore, to the utmost of my power, I shall and will defend this doctrine of His Holiness, right and custom against all usurpers of the heretical or Protestant authority. He goes on to say, I do further declare that the doctrine of the churches of England and Scotland, of the Calvinists, the Huguenots, and others of the name Protestants or liberal to be damnable, and they themselves damned who will not forsake the same. Now, this is not the entire oath because it's long, so I'm just reading you parts of it. I do further declare that I will help, assist, and advise all or any of His Holiness agents in any place, wherever I shall be, in Switzerland, Germany, Holland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, England, Ireland, or America, or in any other kingdom or territory, I shall come to and do my uttermost to extirpate the heretical Protestants or liberals' doctrines and to destroy all their pretended powers, regal or otherwise. It goes on to say, I furthermore promise and declare that I will, when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly, that's a key word, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants, and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls, in order to annihilate forever their execrable race. Then the oath goes on to say that when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poison cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed so to do by any agent of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith of the Society of Jesus. It continues, in confirmation of which I hereby dedicate my life, my soul, and all my corporal powers, and with this dagger which I now receive, I will subscribe my name written in my own blood in testimony thereof. And should I prove false or weaken in my determination, may my brethren and fellow soldiers of the militia of the Pope cut off my hands and my feet and my throat from ear to ear, my belly opened and sulfur burned therein, with all the punishments that can be inflicted upon me on earth, and my soul be tortured by demons in an eternal hell forever. Wow. Well, of course they're going to deny that that's a legitimate oath, because look at what it's saying. And here we have the front image of the Church of Rome, the Vatican, that we're open and we're friendly and we're tolerant. But in reality, the Jesuit order and the Jesuit general, historically many believe, as do you and I, that they're waging a secret and open war with this continuing with this counter-reformation to this day. What is as we conclude part one and get ready for our next program, what is the overall theme we're trying to convey to our Christian brothers and sisters?
Well, I think it's to make people, I think the first step that I've found, my experience in terms of talking to people about these issues, is to make people aware that the counter-reformation is happening today, that it's not just something from the history of the Middle Ages, but that it's taking place, and it's really the key to understanding what's happening in the church, what's happening in our government, what's happening to our economy. We've talked a lot about what's going on with the European Union, but so much of the turmoil that they're facing, people are saying the same storm clouds are gathering for America in a similar way. And so I believe that the contrast, because it was said back in 1888 that the Vatican's ambition was to convert both England and the United States of America, and then to use our two countries to take over the whole world.
And I believe that counter-reformation continues to this day. My guest and friend here is Chris Pinto. He's with noiseofthunder.com. You can check out his website, noiseofthunder.com. You can hear his daily radio show there, as well as on our website at worldviewradio.com, worldviewradio.com. We're going to be recording several programs in this series of the counter-reformation of the Jesuit order. Hope you'll tune into the next program. If you've only able to watch a little bit of this on our website, worldviewtube.com, you've not been able to watch the entire 50 minutes to an hour, then you need to join the Situation Room, situationroom.net. We do put out a few minutes of this interview, 10, 15 minutes, for you to watch free of charge for anyone at worldviewtube.com. But if you'd like to watch the entire interview, you need to join the Situation Room at situationroom.net. Now, if you're watching the entire interview on our national television program, but you'd like more of this, or to watch it again or share it with a friend, we invite you to join the Situation Room at situationroom.net. We'll have access to thousands of dollars in DVDs that you can watch on demand. Really, the Worldview Weekend Situation Room is the premier biblical worldview web-based radio and television network, and we hope you'll join at situationroom.net. Not only are you getting great resources, but it's a major way that supports our general operating budget to continue providing these kind of programs to you. So please consider joining the Situation Room for yourself, but also it helps us out as well. situationroom.net. You can also help us by making a one-time contribution or becoming a monthly contributor. Automatically set up an automatic monthly contribution, tax deductible, to the Worldview Weekend Foundation at worldviewweekendfoundation.com. That's worldviewweekendfoundation.com. Thank you for considering that. We look forward to our next program, where Chris Pinto and I will continue with part two of the counter-reformation of the Jesuit order. Till next time, I'm Brandon House. For all of us here at Worldview Weekend, thanks for watching. Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to tell you about my new book, Religious Trojan Horse, subtitled How False Teaching from Neo-Evangelicals, the New Religious Right, and the Spiritual Left have invaded the church to establish a coming religious world government. This is about 3 years of writing, a few more years than that in the research. It's 488 pages, almost 600 footnotes. You can read about it as far as the description, the table of contents, even a sample chapter on our website there at worldviewweekend.com, so I won't take the time to tell you about that. It is, again, hardcover, and I hope you pick up a copy, maybe a couple copies. I'd be glad to sign a copy for you or for your pastor, associate pastor, friends. It makes a great gift. But in addition to the hardcover book, we have something we've done this time that's brand new. We've done an ebook. Well, that's not new. We've done ebooks before. But what's new is this is actually called an ebook documentary. That's what we're calling it, an ebook documentary. You may ask, why are we calling it an ebook documentary? Because what we've done is we've taken about 100 links to videos and we've embedded them in the ebook. So here's the ebook. You just bring it up on your computer. You can read this on your iPad, your computer. They tell me you can read it on your iPhone and your Android and those kind of devices. But here it is. To read the ebook, you don't have to be connected to the internet, but if you want the videos to play, you're going to have to be connected to the internet. Throughout the book, we've embedded almost 100 links to videos. But here is where I talk about Lou Engle. Here's a video. You click that link. What pops up is a video.
We have words of knowledge. It's not little playthings we're doing. We're bringing forth the very mind of God into someone's life.
And what he goes on to say is that dreams are seed thoughts from God. In other words, dreams are equal to the Word of God. One of the things I talk about in the book are the manifestations that we're seeing within Kundalini Yoga over in the Far East, in India, Hinduism, and the same manifestations that we're seeing in the Word of Faith movement, the New Apostolic Reformation. Now, I can tell you about it in the book, but in the ebook, I can actually show you some demonstrations. Let me show you one of the video clips where a link is embedded in this ebook of manifestations that are showing up in Kundalini Yoga in India with Hinduism, and then how it's manifesting itself now in, quote, the church, in quote, today, what I believe is the false church. First, Kundalini Yoga. Notice these same manifestations, by the way, are showing up now in the Word of Faith teaching. We're seeing these, I believe these are the same manifestations. Watch this.
And it was the very pinnacle prayer of Moses' life. And this prayer came after a burning bush, came after the release of national judgments, came after...
Again, I believe these are not biblical manifestations at all. I believe they're very similar to the manifestations we're seeing in Hinduism and Kundalini Yoga. Again, I tell you about this in the book, but it sure helps to be able to see these manifestations. These are just a few of the things we show in the book. In addition to having links to these video clips embedded in the ebook, every one of the footnotes we have, almost 600, are active. So footnote number 314, you click on it, it brings you right to the bottom of the page where you can see a hyperlink to the article I'm quoting, the Orange County Register. So you can actually see the source I'm quoting. Then you click the link again, brings you right back to where you're reading. So we click 314, takes us right to the bottom of the page, click on that, brings up the Orange County Register, and you can see the actual article where we're talking about Rick Warren having Dr. Oz in his church. Close out the article, you can go right back to where you're reading. Just click 314 again, look at this. Boom, takes you right back into the text where you're reading. Thank you for this opportunity to tell you about the new book, Religious Trojan Horse. Would you do me a favor and post this video on your Facebook page, send out to your email address book a link to this video and to a link where they can read the description of the book. Help us get out the word about this book. This is not just a book. This is actually a book that deals with theology. This book is loaded with scripture, and we address a lot of theological issues. This book actually will be relevant 10 years from now, 20 years from now, because we're dealing with so many important theological issues facing the church today. So thank you for helping me get out the word about the new book, Religious Trojan Horse. Hope you'll get it as a hardcover or as an ebook at worldviewweekend.com. Thank you.